handling of the data that has been collected. This is very important because there's a case of Cambridge Analytica. So there's a consulting firm that worked for Donald Trump's first election. They made use of an app whereby they were gathering data from Facebook respondents. You know, they pretended as if they were conducting a survey, but they were using the data, the insights gotten from this survey, this digital app, to now guide Donald Trump's rhetoric, to now guide Donald Trump's election. It became a very serious case when one of the members of the consulting think tank, revealed this in court, and that consulting think tank was closed down. I also give a case of a hospital. Still talking about data privacy. A hospital that was hacked. And when this hospital was hacked, the information of all the patients were made public with their corresponding illnesses. So, in as much as data cybersecurity focuses on preventing unauthorized access to systems that are housing data, while data privacy has to do with the ethical handling of data that has been collected, how that data can be collected ethically, how it can be handled ethically, and how it can be stored and prevented from running into the wrong hands. I don't know if that has answered your question.
Yes, that is very, very clear. Thank you for explaining that. So what I gather is that cybersecurity is more or less like, locking your doors, making sure everywhere is
Exactly.
locked up so that there is unauthorized access. While privacy is things
Yes.
like, I use this analogy for more or
The
less like
ethical.
opening your windows, people don't see what you are doing inside your house. Something
Good.
like that.
Good.
Okay, so thank you so much. Madam
Yes.
Chibugo, my next question to you, ma'am. So my question is, I know a lot of us download a lot of apps that, before you use, you have to click, I agree. And most times, when you look at that, number of pages to read, that legal document to read, you just scroll past it. You just want to click, I agree, just so you can use the app. So my question is to you, Madam Chibugo, is when people actually click I agree without actually reading the privacy policies and all the policies in that legal document, can we still say that they have given their real consent, or they're just trying to, just get the app? And it's taking control of your data. Realistic for people without digital skills, how do you tell them to take control of their data? Or is it just for those with digital skills that can actually take control of their data?
Thank you very much for that question, Priscilla. Please confirm that you can hear me.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Please, Dr. Paul, please, can you mute or any other person?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry.
All right, thank you very much. So I think that's a two-part question. So let me start with the first one. When a user clicks on I agree without actually reading the privacy policy, can we say that is real consent? I don't know the specifics of what the law says about that, but personally, I would say that I don't think that is real consent. And the reason is that, we have people download applications or sign up on applications because they have a reason for, I want to use this for something. Maybe I want to take a loan, I want to play a game, I want to be able to communicate with a certain community. I need this particular application for an assignment or for a project. And then imagine that you download the application and you sign up, and before your sign up is complete, you're told to, read this privacy policy and click I agree for you to be able to access the application. Now you go and check out the privacy policy and you're seeing like 10 pages with a lot of big grammar that you don't even understand. And now you see, the most interesting part is that it doesn't even matter whether you understand it or not. The important thing is that if you do not agree, you do not get to use the application. So in this case now, it is not, I would not really call it consent. I would just say, someone would rather go and click on I agree and go ahead to use the application, because whether I know what the policy is talking about, whether I don't know, whether I understand it, whether I do not understand it, bottom line is I need to use this application, and for me to be able to use it, irrespective of what my thoughts are, I need to agree. So that is just people doing whatever it is that they need to do to get by or to get things done. So we cannot really call that consent because it is not willing and it is not fully informed. So for the second one, data control, is it something that is for everybody, or is it something that is for a selected number of people? I would also say that data privacy, data protection these are terms that are familiar to only people that are well versed digitally, people that are very digitally literate, people that have, spent time in rooms where conversations like this are going on, right? Now, for other people, all these things just sound like foreign concepts. If you go to the market, you cannot have a reasonable conversation with a woman in the market about data privacy and data protection, because really she doesn't even understand the concept. Not because she might not be educated, but because the whole concept just sounds foreign to her. It all sounds so technical. Imagine that, someone even reaches out to such a person to say, oh, there's this new privacy update. Go to your phone and change this particular privacy setting. The first challenge she's even going to have is trying to navigate to locate where that setting is in her phone. And then the second thing is, okay, I've gotten here, so what's next? What do I click on next? If I click on this, what does it do? Where does it take me to? What does it mean? Is it going to stop some functions from my phone? So it is not just that these things are not easily accessible to us. Also, that a lot of people do not even understand them. And you see, that is what now makes it a privilege, because it is just a very few number of people that actually know what this data privacy means. They understand the implications and the impact that it has on the rest of us. So it becomes a privilege to those who are digitally inclined. And this is not actually how it's supposed to be. Everybody should have a right to data protection, data privacy. And my recommendation for this would be that, first things first, we make all these laws, data, what are they called, policies, simpler, so that people can understand what exactly it is that they're getting themselves into. They can make more informed decisions, they can give more informed consent. Secondly, I think we need to increase our efforts in digital literacy. Yes, we're already doing a lot of good work, but we also need to teach more people. We need to put in more effort. We need more individuals and more organizations to get on board and, play their own part and educate the next person. And then finally, I think we can also now take away the role of the responsibility to protect the data fully from the users, and now integrate systems whereby data is protected by default, so that way, that woman in the market that has an account with the bank is sure that her details that have been given to the bank are secure and are protected. That man that is a retiree that has given his details to his pension scheme knows that his details are protected. That young lady that just went to church on Sunday and gave them her details as a first timer knows that her data is going to be used responsibly. And we should also have consequences for when this data is misused. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chibugo. You've covered quite a lot in this question, talking about from data policies being simpler for easier understanding, just so that people, even the layman, can read it and understand what he's signing up for, and to data privacy being protected by default. This one, well, these are great recommendations. So thank you so much for that. My next question goes to Mr. Oche. And my question to you is, should using push user selection, design tricks that will just make you to just accept whatever they're giving you, just so that you can move on. Similar to what you, Madam Chibugo, answered. Is it a privacy? Should it be considered a privacy violation? And as an adjoining question to this is, after a data breach, who is responsible, or what responsibility does an organization still have for affected users once the technical issues are fixed? Let's assume there's a data breach. The having that data or hosting that data after the issue is fixed. I hope my question is clear, sir.
Yeah, yes, it is. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me on this platform. I don't know, you at the beginning of or before you asked the question, you had the last speaker was saying something about data being protected by default, or I don't know if I got that right. It's going to be a very big concern, a great recommendation, big concern, and the reason is because part of what I'm going to talk about from your question borders around that. As regards trick, most people developers who develop services for people to use usually have a service to deliver. And to get people to, enjoy those services or participate or, use those services, they sort of put in one or two tricks. It's simply a way of pushing people to, give consent without really understanding what fully is in there. So if I'm going to answer that first part question, a very short, straight answer is if design tricks to push users into accepting data collection privacy is a violation, I'll say yes, it is. It's a strong violation. It's a violation. And it is what we call in cybersecurity field, we call that dark patterns. Once patterns begin to become not very clear, and it suggests that you are attempting to get my consent in evasive ways, is a big problem. So it normally focuses on manipulating users, right, into giving choices that they would freely not make if, for example, the details were clear. So one of the way they handle those kind of things in the design is to sometimes make one of the options, accept all button is larger than the reject. Sometimes you may see that if you go to certain sites where you purchase things, particularly when you have to punch in your card numbers, you notice they are pre-ticking, for, let's say, remember card details. Those things are sometimes pre-checked or pre-ticked. And then sometimes even when last speaker was talking about reading a 10-page document, sometimes the wordings are quite, how do I put it? They're quite confusing, right? And in some cases, you may notice things, people using, the first speaker, Doctor was speaking, Dr. Paul was saying something about Cambridge Analytica. One of the tricks that they used at the point was to get people to share what they called improve your experience. So instead of them to have done stuff like share your data with a third party, they just put on tricky point there. So when people click or get to interact with services with not so plain terms, it is a violation. And it's a privacy violation because here's the thing, as regards to policies that are in place and laws that are in place that protect customer consumption rights, the standpoint is very clear. As regards giving consent, it is, if you are going to say giving consent is valid, it must be, number one, the person giving the consent must be informed. Then the person should be willing to freely give without any external coercion. Then the information you want the person to give has to be specific, right? And in asking the person to give information, it has to be unambiguous. When you begin to use, trick to mislead or nudge or wear the person down, it suggests that the consent is not freely given. So simply put, if whether those tricks in design are a violation, I'll say yes, they are a violation. And if we're looking at it from the perspective of our laws, say, for example, the GDPR, data protection right, the general data protection right, which Nigeria cascaded has down from, which is the Nigerian data protection right, it triggers a lot of regulatory issues, when it comes to those kind of design. So developers, service deliverers who are digital platforms, they must be in compliance with these laws. One of the things that they may face is regulatory fines. Then there's also a case of reputational damage, and to mention just a few of the list. So from an ethical perspective, it is better for the person to say, hey, this is what I want to get down to trick you. So once attention and cognitive bias is what you are dealing with and you are trying to earn trust, it's safer for it to be very plain. But once it starts becoming something that is not clear, then it is a violation. The second part of your question focuses on what should happen regarding to data breach. Or well, before I even say that, I think let me try to run my thoughts in the first point. The first point you were saying whether it's a breach. So let me put it this way: if for some reason a user, right, if a service deliverer or somebody who gives service online or any of those digital platforms desires to get data from a client or from a client, let's put it that way. If the user fully understands, here's what should be in the back of his mind. Say if a user fully understands what was happening, would the user still choose yes? Right? So if your honest answer is probably not, then the design is, let's put it this way, in our terms, because we're looking at it in our field, it's abusive. And it is focusing on deceiving that particular user. Okay, so asking about if after a data breach, what responsibility remains for the what's the role, what's the responsibility of the person giving the service? So I would say that fixing, because the question is two parts there, is after a data breach. So that means that we're hoping that the person has fixed or the organization has fixed the data. Now, if they have fixed it, then fixing the system is only one step. Okay, so the organization or the person or the body, the responsibility continues. And I'll look at it from three levels. There's a legal aspect to it, there's a practical aspect, then this other aspect is usually on the conscience. That's the moral aspect. From the legal perspective, you are expected, based on our laws, you are expected to have been able to notify regulators. This is captured under the Data Protection Data Protection Act. You are expected to, within 72 hours, inform the regulators, notify them, right? After they've been notified, you inform users that are affected. So you do that promptly. And you have to do it very detailed. You explain what happened, what data were affected, what are the likely risks that they face, what are they doing about it, and all of those stuff, So it's very, very important. So that's from the responsibility that they have legally, because these are actually what we can drag in court. Practical responsibilities to users would be that if there's a risk, they should advise users on steps to protect themselves. Stuff like two-step verification, strengthening your passwords, and the rest of them, right? So as far as ongoing accountability is concerned, after the incident, they are expected to, apart from to the client or to the customers, they should be able to, as an organization, be able to review, right? Upgrade when necessary their security infrastructure or apparati, and then be also able to educate their staff. Because this, as far as data protection is concerned and cybersecurity issues, we don't know it all. What you knew last year, December, might have just evolved. So there's the need to keep train and retraining, then also update policies, where it's necessary, conduct audit. From the moral perspective, this borders on a lot of people's issues. A lot of people within our society are claiming they are not morally sound. They don't feel obligated to, delivering adequate services. So on this ground, I'll say yes, it's a real privacy violation, not making things clear. And these are part of what they are supposed to be able to deliver. I hope I was able to shed light on your question.
And
Uh,
the organizations. Thank you. That was actually clear. Hold on. After the entire conversation.
Sorry, I'm not hearing you. I don't know if the question is directed at me. I can't hear you. Sorry.
So just keep the question at you right now. I'll just giving my own understanding of what you spoke about, and
Okay.
then to
All right.
say quick for other questions from fans, they should hold on until after the entire conversation, or they should drop in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you.
So my next question is to Dr. Paul. With the whole BVN, NIN, SIM registration, voters card, there's just so places where I think in our last data privacy day that we had last year, there were other means of collecting data that I did not really catch, or that I did not pay attention to. I think it was one of the speakers that drew my attention to it. That when you even travel, even by road, they used to have this manifest where they will take your name and your this and that and that. And, thankfully or hopefully you get your destination safe. What happens to, those kind of data, things like that? So with that, I'm just asking this question to say, with the whole BVN, SIM registration and all of that, all of these data are, in one way or the other, they are all linked to our identities as Nigerians. So do Nigerians still really have a choice over how their data is actually collected?
Well, in many cases, Nigerians have limited practical choice, especially where services are essential. BVN is used in the banks and the voters card and all of that. But it is very, very important in as much as all of these um, data collections are important. It is also the right. It is mandatory. It's important that Nigerians know. They have the right to know why the data is being collected. Nigerians have a right to know how the data will be handled securely so as to prevent it from falling into wrong hands. And of course, the right to prevent it from being misused or unauthorized sharing. The issue is less about whether the data is being collected. It's more about the ethical, handling or ethical governance of the data being collected. They have to reassure Nigerians that this data will be handled ethically and it will not fall into wrong hands. Because this really has to do with data privacy, which of course I know Nigeria um, is really, really serious about. Hello, hello.
Thank you, sir.
Hel- Okay,
So
okay.
I,
Did you hear me all through?
so I said,
Okay.
yes, I heard you. So basically, data should be ethically collected.
And of course, not just ethically collected. Like we said, the reason for being collected is known, and of course, it will be ethically collected, and of course, it will be prevented. That assurance, so as to get the trust of the people giving the data, that the data will not be misused or
Mm.
it will be prevented from unauthorized access.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chibugo.
Okay.
Also talking about, how this data is collected.
The hand is up. I don't know. Christabel, the Bangadu, hands is up. I don't know. Maybe she has a.
Nigerian organizations about, what data.
Hello, I didn't hear you.
Question
I didn't hear what you were
until
saying.
the end of the session. Please, I said, can you hold on to your question for now until the entire panel session,
Session.
and then we have a question and answer session, please.
Okay.
Okay. So my next question is to Madam Chibugo, and my question is, how transparent are Nigerian organizations, about the data that they collect? Not just about the data that they collect, also why they collect it, how long do they want to keep it, and who they will share it with. We know different organizations collect data for different reasons. So let's assume two of the speakers here are working in the university. They collect data. So you can use that as your example, or if you have any other example. But we need to know what data are they collecting, why they are collecting it, how long do they want to keep it? Because we've seen where people selling akara are using some students, question booklets to pack or package akara or suya for us. So please, can you address this question, Madam Chibugo?
Okay, thank you very much, Priscilla, for that question. So to just further expand on what Dr. Paul has already said, when it comes to, I would say that I believe that when it comes to what data is collected, that to a very large extent, Nigerian companies are open about what data they collect. Where we have an issue though is why they are collecting it, right? Because why am I signing up on a camera application or a loan app and you're asking for access to my contacts? What business do my contacts have with a transaction that is between you and I? Or what business do my contacts have with a picture that I'm trying to edit or a video I'm trying to edit? You see? So these are like instances. They collect this data, they don't tell us why exactly they're collecting it. We don't know why exactly they're collecting it, but we give access anyway because, there are no many other choices available to us. Now, when it comes to how long the data is kept, I would say that one, the conversation, like that conversation has never really been in the room with us because you hardly ever see organizations telling you, oh, we are going to keep your data for this long, and after this duration, we are going to destroy it or we archive it or something like that. They just talk about what rights they have to your data, which data they need you to provide, basically. They don't tell you why, they don't tell you how long. And then when it comes to who they share the data with, I think that's also a very gray area. What they usually tell us is very vague. You hear things like, or you see, things like we're going to share this with partners, or we're going to share this with a third party or a third party company, a third party application. But they don't expressly tell you who those partners are or who the third party is going to be. You just know that your data is being shared with somebody that is their partner or someone that is, maybe another third party application that they're affiliated with. So it's just generally a very, very gray area. Now you gave the instance with universities. Somebody also mentioned, I think that was one of the speakers, and you too mentioned, that data is it manifesto they call it, that is collected when you're traveling by road. All those details that you put in, what happens to it after? You know that there are so many, when you go back to school so many years after, you still see like a whole lot of files for people that still use the analog and manual systems. You still see a whole lot of files being packed in offices. At most, when it becomes too crowded, they move it to maybe another room to create more space for the new ones. There's never really any concrete plan or any definite plan that, oh, if a file has stayed for 10 years, for instance, or for 20 years, we know that this student will not need these details again. How about we trash it? Or even when we digitize these records, how long are we required to keep some of the details? Yes, we know that the person is always going to need to be able to reach out, to get their details to confirm that this person was a student. But how much of that data is really necessary for us to still hold on to? So these are just generally gray areas. I would say that the most we know is what data they are collecting, but how the rest of the data is managed or why it is being collected, we don't really get to know so much about that.
Okay. The rest of it, apart from what data is being collected, the rest of it is more or less gray areas. Okay. So my next question is to Mr. Oche. Madam Chibugo raised a point about loan apps even ask for your contact lists. And I know that I have received 2 messages from these loan apps, trying to shame 1 or 2 of my contacts people to say they collected loan and they were not able to pay back, and this and that, put their picture, wrote nasty messages and whatnot. Some of them are false, some are true, whatever. But this is like an abuse of the data that they have. So for loan companies or organizations like loan apps are publicly shame, their defaulters using their contact list. What privacy rights are being violated? Also, should loan recovery methods that involve harassment or data misuse be treated as privacy violations or financial misconduct? Or is it both?
All right, thank you. So this is like trying to meddle in a marriage between 2 people, because if you see anybody patronizing loan apps that perhaps have been under pressure and went into a union which third parties were not party to, they were not there, so their consents were not given. So when it comes to what happened between the both of them, it should have remained between the both of them. However, there's usually an arbiter who gets to sit and do the joining of people who are getting married. So this is like coming between 2 married people. However, we have laws and we have regulations in our land that help to moderate all of this and also regulate them. With respect to, I think there are 2 parts. You're talking about what privacy rights are being violated, especially when loan apps publicly shame defaulters using their contact list. If you look at, I think the first question you asked that I threw to me was with regards to design tricks. Those loan apps, their applications, so there are certain designs are within the application that trick you into consenting to them accessing your contact. Now, they don't tell you explicitly what they want to use the contacts for. Well, we know today, because before now, you just accept them. Somebody who's under pressure, wanting to take money, just goes ahead to take it, not knowing what access to their contact is. So most of these tricks are within every design. I think there should be some form of regulation as far as designs are concerned. Then we can actually handle some of this. So when a loan app, right, accesses let's say, borrower's contact, and then goes ahead to send messages to the contacts, there are several core privacy and data protection rights that have been breached. Core part of it. Number 1 is we can say right to informed and specific consent. Now, of course, when they are clicking it, they don't know. Now people know because we have 1 or 2, consents from different places. I've also had the same situation where they go as far as even sending pictures of the borrower, right, with animals, having some relations with animals, saying this person is so and so, contact them to have lots of pictures and all. You realize that even in recovery of loans, that is a very extreme measure to take. Right. However, we're not involved when they were, discussing terms of receiving the loans. They should be checked. If you look at our Nigeria Data Protection Act as published in 2023, as enacted in 2023, it is clear in that document that personal data can only be processed with clear, specific, and informed consent. Right. And if you are doing that, it should be for a defined purpose. So whether the borrower consented to contact access or not, or identity verification, there's a need for the borrower to understand why we're accessing this. And there should also be ways to get it. We have cases of borrowers who are defaulters. When we say defaulters, not just being on the case of some very natural things, they just perpetually does default. I know of people who have gone to different loan apps, borrowed money and broken the SIM card and thrown away. So yes, the borrower did not consent to their contacts being used for debt shaming or pressure tactics to recover this. There's a law. There's how to go about it. That's under our data protection, like the Nigerian Data Protection Act. Another thing that is a breach or another violation is I think part of what you asked the previous speaker, Mrs. Chigo, is with respect to data minimization. And this is where you focus on necessary data for stated purposes. So this data, we are receiving it for this purpose. It should be very clear. It's as captured in our act. So the privacies that are being violated, that's part of what I'm listening at. So the data minimization, then if you were to have access to somebody's full contact list, it's not necessary to recover a loan. Right? When you begin to use it for intimidation and excessive and unlawful action, it is actually completely out of it. Because if you are receiving somebody's data, minimize it to what you want to use it for. They don't tell you they want to use it for recovery. So that's a violation. Then there's also right to confidentiality, and that is from that's of course, confidentiality focuses on unauthorized disclosure. So you want to be able to have, if you have access to my data that you've received from me on whatever platform, then there's got to be a need to, keep it confidential, right? Whether it's, for example, my debt status is my personal financial information. Once you share it with a third party, you are in violation, right? So without my consent, it's an unlawful disclosure of personal data. So that should be checked. There's also right to dignity, and I think it's called reputational harm. So all of these are very, very, these are part of the breaches that have happened. So let me jump straight to the last part um, of your question where you asked, I think it says, should loan recovery methods that involve harassment or data misuse be treated as privacy violations, if I got that right? Yes. I mean, like, yes, they should be treated that way. Now, you must understand that there's a relationship, and each party in this particular conversation, in this particular transaction, is answerable to certain authorities. Number one, there's a lender. Now, if the person is a lender, the person must have gone through processes to be established as a lender. Okay, CBN is there. I think it's NCCPC. That's the I don't know. Okay, sorry, FCCPC. That's the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, right? They've gone through the processes required of establishing such services. So there are responsibilities expected of them. So the lender process personal data unlawfully. That is part of what they are supposed to provide. They're supposed to provide, I don't know how to put it now. They are answerable to this body, right? To say we will not use this. Usually, the purpose for which consent was given, once it's been exceeded, then of course the person, that particular lender, is in violation. And we'll have regulators. The regulators are regulators with the Data Protection Commission, the Nigerian Data Protection Commission. They would put it, or that action puts that particular organization into possible fines, license restriction, compliance orders, and the rest of it, right? So, yes, the loan recovery method, right, is a violation of the is a violation of, or should be treated as privacy violation, the way they go about it. And as regards financial misconduct, because they are a loan app, they are registered under CBN, right? So if the lender is licensed or tied to CBN, of course they are, because they get those from there. They can be blacklisted, their app can be blacklisted. They can be withdrawn from the various stores where you get this application from. Then there are bans that are placed on them for operational reasons. And there's also for them to, there's a liability that they have, which is civil. And this can actually lead to litigations in law. So publicly shaming borrowers through their contact list is a serious privacy breach. And it should be, there are regulations for it, it should be adhered to. One of the things I think we need to do as regards most of these conversations is to, as much as possible, sensitize the public. We'll call on organizations, especially like yours, to, as much as possible, sensitize people on the availability of these laws and how its content actually help to protect their rights. So whatever information they give out at whatever place in whatever time, the organization to which they give this data is liable to ensuring that they're protected. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. This is the final round of questions, and I'm back to you, Dr. Paul. And the question, my final question, more or less leaning on what Mr. Oche has just spoken about, especially with digital lenders, how they have access to contact photos, of its users. What warning signs should users known as fintech app when they are installing those apps?
Okay.
All of those things that
Um,
come up, what kind of warning signs should they look for?
okay. The warning signs they should look for: one, excessive permissions unrelated to the service. You need just to get maybe my BVN and my passport. But when you start asking for things beyond these, you're granting permissions to contact on your list. For what? And other excessive permissions related to the service. That's one. Second one, no clear explanation of why data is needed. That's these excessive, extraneous, data permissions you are requesting for. There's no clear explanation why you want this data. That's the second one. And the third one is that there are threats, also tied to data access. You know, there are threats tied to data access. And of course, poor, or missing privacy policies. Nobody is trying to assure you that your data is secured, your data will not be released to anyone. So these are the kind of red flags or warning signs you can easily, look out for. A legitimate financial service should assess risk, without invading unrelated aspects of how the user's private life should be. What do you need phone contacts, access to their phone contacts for, or access to their gallery, or a lot of those extraneous things? You've gotten their BVN, which has all their details. You have their passport. So why are you seeking for, permissions unrelated to the service?
Thank you, sir. Madam Chibugo, I'm back to you again. Hopefully, the final round of the question. And this question is: most Nigerian biometric data to access. So, at what point does consent actually become coercion?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. Let's look at it this way. In Nigeria today, as it is, if you want to get a SIM card, you want to get a passport, you want to register for JAM, you want to get your NIN, even to a very large extent, job interviews, right? It's going to require that you submit your biometric data. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there is any other alternative to doing this. So we can now say at this point that consent has become coercion because it is not really given. And real consent basically is when I can say yes because I have enough information to say yes to, like, to give my consent for my data to be taken. I can also choose to say no. And even after I have said yes, I can still decide to withdraw my consent later. So if I don't have the freedom to withdraw my consent without, fear of being punished or without being excluded, then at that point we can't really call it consent. We rather just call it compliance, right? Because you have to do this to get what you need. Now, um, this also doesn't mean that it is wrong for us to be collecting biometric data. No, we know that sometimes this can be very, very useful and also very necessary. But seeing as sometimes now we cannot do without collecting this data, what do we now do going forward? We need to understand that biometric data is very, very sensitive data. And so it should be managed with the highest form of transparency. We need to know how this information or how this data is going to be managed. How is it going to be protected? We need to limit the use of such sensitive data to only when it is necessary. We need to know for how long we have to keep it. Are we just keeping it because we have it? Or are we keeping it only for what it is necessary for, basically? And generally, you just need to protect the data because we need to understand that when people give out their biometric information, it's not just them giving data like, oh, this is my name, this is where I come from. They're actually giving you their identity. And so if that identity is not properly managed, if it is not properly protected, it could get into the wrong hands, and it could be used for a chain of, I don't know, a whole lot of irregularities. And this is basically someone's identity that is being dealt with here. So it should just basically be treated with, utmost caution. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And for you, Mr. Oche, my question to you is, should the government or companies be allowed to recycle our data? For example, if I give my data, for a SIM card registration, should it suddenly pop up when I'm trying to open an account or in an election database without my specific permission?
So that's a very interesting part. If you go to other clients, right, you'd observe that you have an identity that can be called, and once the identity is called, something like a number or something, a lot of other things about you can come up. So I'm able to put in that particular identity in the system, and it can tell me your driving history, your hospital history, and the rest of them. Now, so if we're trying to emulate such stuff from other places, and our government is trying to look at that happening here, I would say it has to come with very strict limitations or strict limits. We have a lot of data collection happening everywhere. Like everybody has put it that, from the last year's meeting, my attention was drawn, just like you rightly mentioned. I didn't look at that aspect of going to a motor park and having information of mine on a piece of paper and not knowing what's going to happen afterwards. So if we bring it to SIM card registration, now SIM card registration is for telecommunication companies, right? So if we're looking at things like BVN, perhaps that will be for bank financial organizations. We now have the one that is coming up. It was rumored that 1st of January, and we're not so sure whether it's going to kickstart as being rumored in 31st and all of those. This is our tax identity. You have all of this information. So reusing data collected for one purpose should not be automatic. It shouldn't be open-ended. The principle of data privacy that is at stake here is purpose limitation. So if, for example, I'm going to have data protection, one of the oldest and most respected rules, if I'm allowed to say, is collect data for a specific reason, use it for that reason. That's all. Do not quietly extend it to others. So if we're going to do, like, let's narrow it to the question that you asked now, to the examples you gave. For example, SIM registration should be given to telecoms, right? So that they can identify subscribers and, for example, maybe in some cases, support lawful regulation. There are cases where people get missing, they're not able to reach them, but they have a phone number and they went out with their phones. You go to the police and they say, okay, all right, you go to the telecoms and say, I want to track this number. I don't know where it was. But then you go to the police and get some report that allows us to do this and that. Cases of cars having trackers, and because those trackers, most of them have SIM cards in them, and say, okay, I want to track my car, and you go to the police, oh yeah, give us a number and all of this stuff. So these are collections that should be used for those specific purposes. But when I find those information being used in other organizations or for other services, that in itself is a violation. And the government, being the prefect in this case, should be able to ensure that they are used. Now, the biggest concern for me particularly, and I don't know it's for a lot of Nigerians, will be for tax data, which is going to become a thing. So it's given to the government, and government can access and collect revenue for that. We're hearing that within the laws that it is possible for the tax regulator to be able to use a law enforcement agent is becoming very disturbing. So when the same data is reused for something else, the relationship changes. It moves from, I think it was Madam Chibugo that was saying earlier. So what was supposed to be compliance, right, now would just quietly become surveillance, right? Or let's even look at this like profiling. So if it's not carefully controlled, so there's a need for strict, is it regulations now, or an eye should be put there. So when reuse can be justified is when we can use it, and that will be based on those laws or those policies, right? So it can be, let's say, if, for example, say the purpose is compatible with the original purpose. Meaning, if I collect data for a specific purpose and what I want to use it for, right, is in compliance with what I originally used it for, then fine. I think it was Dr. I was speaking earlier when he mentioned about Cambridge Analytica. Very interesting. The organization was known as a political, I think they were a political analysis firm, and they were contracted. But how they got the data was completely wrong. They got the data quite all right, but what they used in getting the data was completely wrong. And they got good data from social media platforms, but they used it in advancing some other person's cause, which at that point was political ambition. So if I use data, right, let's say using SIM data to prevent SIM-related fraud, that's cool. If I use tax information to prevent tax-related fraud, that is cool. So it can become a clear legal basis, not just an internal policy. So whatever policies are going to be implemented, they should focus on this reuse. It should stay within related concerns. I think that's how much I can say for it. Except with our questions, then we can perhaps even elucidate more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just for one minute each, I have for Dr. Paul, my question to you is for the Nigerian citizen, what is the bigger threat? Is it having weak data laws or having strong laws? I know we have very good data protection. We have a Data Protection Act and good data protection laws that are guiding us. But is it having weak data laws or having strong laws enforcing,
Okay.
which
Okay.
is a bigger threat?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So laws that are not enforced are more dangerous
Mm.
because they create a false sense of protection. And worst more, they embolden violators and discourage public trust. So two things are happening here. They are emboldening violators and also discouraging public trust. Even modest laws, when consistently enforced, are more effective than strong laws that exist only on paper. So the enforcement serves as a deterrent to both to potential and current violators, and is also getting the trust, which is most importantly, getting the trust from users who know that their data is being protected by the law enforcement agencies.
Okay, thank you so much. Mrs. Chibugo, 1 minute as well. This question is: if we are sitting across from a policy maker today, or sitting in a room where policy is being made, and could only demand one change to fix the data protection in Nigeria, what would that one thing be for you?
Okay, I would say that we already have a whole lot of laws and policies, but
Mm-hmm.
we couldn't feel their impact, right? Privacy policies and notices should be written in plain, simple English that people can understand, not in legal grammar. Sometimes it feels like they're writing these things for the sake of the lawyers and not for the people that are actually supposed to be reading them, right? So people should clearly know what data is being collected, why it is needed, how long it should be kept, and how to withdraw consent if it is necessary. Now, but we also need to know that clarity is not enough. Clarity is just one side of the coin. There also have to be real consequences when organizations misuse data. If our rules are not enforced, then the user just practically remain unprotected, which means there was no point having the rules in the first place if you're not going to inform them. So when we see that there are real consequences for mismanaging data, people begin to trust those laws more. And as the trust grows, you see that people are now more conscious about how their data is managed. Organizations are more conscious about how they manage data because they don't want to end up paying for the consequences of misusing the data. And with that, everybody just generally benefits. So I'll just say in summary, make privacy rules simpler and enforce them properly. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. So similar. Also said about the enforcement laws that are not enforced at all are even more dangerous, and they're making the privacy laws even simpler for the users to understand. So, Mr. Oche, 1 minute as well to you. My last question is, um, years from now, with AI and all of this that is now integrated into our lives, what is one hidden privacy risk that you think, in your opinion, Nigerians are not prepared for yet, especially with the advancement of AI?
Okay, so I would say it's a very interesting question. 5 years is too far. We're looking at even the next number of, let's say in the nearest future, say maybe months, right? So
Okay.
I'll say more frequent and sophisticated data breaches. It will be frequent because you have people now who just go online and tell AI, right, to build the script or build the code to do this, that, and that. So we're going to have that. We'll have most of very, very soon. We're having those, just that it's not been publicized as much. There's going to be identity theft, particularly with in the advent this tax dispensation, right? We're going to have identity theft and maybe financial fraud. With more breaches, will come more stolen data. I'm thinking also we're going to have, I think last year when we talked about the data privacy, we mentioned enforcement. Very important. Weak enforcement, and then we also have compliance gaps. Okay, so we have data protection framework. It was improved with the Data Protection Act, but enforcement capacities and compliance across businesses vary. Different businesses and different sectors have varying compliance. There are certain sectors that have very sound compliance, but not all. They're also going to have, you mentioned AI rapid adoption of new techs, but the challenge is we will not have corresponding safeguards. So people need to be aware of the emerging technology that we have. All in all, I'll just summarize it into saying individuals should be cautious about sharing personal data and practice good digital hygiene. Businesses should align with Data Protection Act and also invest in cybersecurity. That way, they can also integrate privacy in their technology design. Then I'll say for policymakers and also regulators and enforcers, they need to build enforcement capacities and be able to update laws for that capture these emerging technologies. These are things I have to say.
Hey, okay. Thank you so much to our panelists. Very, very breaking down these questions, answering us, giving us more clarity. Personally, I've learned quite. So now, I'll give opportunity. There are questions. You can drop it on the chat, or you can raise your hand, and we'll take your questions. Mr. Nkoro will handle the question and answer session. Hands.
All right, thank you so much. Then if there are other questions, I let you know. But so the floor is open to everybody now to ask a question so that our panelists or any other person can be able to respond to it. All right, so Christabel, can you go ahead with your question?
Everyone.
Christabel, can you go ahead with your question?
Yeah,
A bit of background noise. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So I have two questions. Can I do two questions or just one?
All right, go ahead.
So I have a question concerning one of the provisions of the Nigeria Data Privacy Act or law, I believe. So there's this provision that I know of. I think it's called the right to be forgotten or right to erasure or something. So I just wanted some clarity on how that law would be, how it would function in the Nigerian setting. So I want to know, like my surface understanding of how that law would work is that every individual should have the right to get their information off the internet, especially in cases where they've done misdeeds in the past or something. So, how would that function in the Nigerian setting? For example, can someone who is a felon, a heinous felon, simply wake up and decide, oh, I don't want information about this crime to be this horrible crime against humanity, for example, to still be on the internet for people to know about? Can people who have corrupt officials, for example, wake up and say, okay, I don't want information about this misdeed to be on the internet anymore? So I want a practical understanding of how that right to be forgotten would work in the Nigerian setting, the context. So that's my first question. So my second question stems from some experiences I've had at the hospital. So it's about my medical data. So once I was under, I think it's a HMO from my employer. So I was sick at some point. I had to go to the hospital. I had to get some tests done. And I had to, they prescribed stuff that I would take and all that. Everything was going fine. But like I wanted to see my test results. And the hospital told me that because I didn't pay, because I'm like under my employer sort of, that I can't get my test results. I didn't want to make trouble or whatnot at the time. So I just wanted to get, treated and leave because I was just sick. But I want to know, is there something going on in the medical sector, the Nigerian medical sector? What rights do I really have under the medical sector, aside that particular experience? There was one time that a friend, a colleague was sick when I was, he was sick, so we took him to a teaching hospital. And when we realized, myself and my colleagues were like, we don't like the way this guy is getting treated in this public hospital. Let's take him to a private hospital. Okay, let's get his file, right? And they're telling us we can't get those information. We can't I was the one who took this guy to the hospital when he collapsed. And they're telling me because what we wanted to do was to simply take his stuff to the new hospital so they'll know this and this has been administered, this and this has been done on him, so that they don't go, prescribing things that have been prescribed before. And these people are telling us that we can't have access to his file. And that was how, before we were able to get small matter, had to become a suffrage movement. We had to start involving school government, SUG, and the rest. And that was when they were pressured into releasing this guy's documents. So that and my experience when I had to go to the hospital, under my employer's HMO, and they said I can't see my own test results and my own file and everything because it's my employer paying, when I'm not even a minor or anything. So those are the two questions I have. What rights do I have under, as a citizen to my own medical information? And why do hospitals do this? Why do I experience this at the hospital? And then the second question is about the right to be forgotten. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Christabel. I think that's a critical point you've raised, especially the last one. It's a very critical issue. So I want any of the panelists to respond to this question because it's a very critical issue. I don't think it's not just only you. I've had this experience to someone, and it's a very big challenge. So can we respond to this?
Okay, let me say something about the first one. Let me just give a little thing about the first felon, the case of the felon. So, felons cannot erase their crime records, you know, because the law enforcement, the judicial records for public safety, for prevention of crime, and for exercise of legal claims, they cannot delete their records. These are things that have already been, been committed. But the problem is, Nigeria, a lot of these things are not even digitalized. So a lot of them are even still on paper. Most times you hear of even banks burning, now talk of police stations and a lot of these judicial offices. That can only be the possible way that crimes could be deleted, or when a court declares um, someone acquitted. That's what I think, that this a convicted person cannot demand deletion of court judgments, EFCC, ICPC, or police records, news reports of trials or convictions, public court registries, government gazettes. So this is just my little contribution.
Okay.
Okay, so let me
Okay.
let me shed some light. Okay, so let me shed some light
Okay.
on it. Very, very correct. What doctor said is very correct. You know, people always mistake. What Christopher was asking about, the right to be forgotten, is captured in the NDPA as the right to erasure. Now, the document explicitly states, okay, before I get there, you know that as regards the data that you have, the data is yours until you give it. The person who receives the data is mandated by certain regulations to handle the data. The conditions under which they handle the data differ, right? However, the process should be true in accordance to the law. Now, so if it is with respect to criminal behavior, you know that it has left the hands of that third party or that person who handles the data to enforcement agencies. Part of what we're discussing here is to ensure that we have enforcement of these laws. So once it gets to enforcement, that belongs solely to the government, and the government reserves the right, because part of the erasure includes certain restrictions, right? This is organizational restrictions, depending on the gravity of what that data is for. So once somebody is a felon, being a felon is not just what is not a service you give, it's an action of yours that impacted the society. There's an agency within the government that's responsible for correcting this behavior. So the law captures it, right? And says that as far as it relates to, that's under the NDPA, the right to be forgotten, it doesn't automatically override criminal records, right? So there's legal constraints, just like how Doctor said. So there are legal constraints. There's also the limited applicability, especially when it relates to criminal behaviors, when you have judicial purposes. I can recall it because sometimes when they make laws, or when they in court, they refer to certain cases that somebody won on account of one or two irregularities or perhaps a particular lacuna. So yes, if somebody is or was a felon, the right to erasure doesn't cover the person. He doesn't enjoy such as because it's criminal records. With respect to health records, now this is part of why compliance must be enforced. There needs to be enforcement as regards you being a third party or you being the party receiving somebody's information. There is what you do with the data up until deletion. And if after deletion has been effected, you come up with that information, you are in violation, even as a body responsible. So we have an act. So that law covers it. That's how much I have to say about that.
Okay,
All right. Thank you so much.
I would just like to
Okay.
add a
Okay. Go
little
ahead.
to the question about hospitals restricting personal health records. And what the law actually says about that is that the patient is the primary owner. The patient has the primary rights to the contents of the record. So those records ultimately belong to whoever the patient is. It doesn't matter if you're paying out of pocket or if the health service is being paid for by a HMO. The medical records belong to you. You have the right to request for copies. You have the right to determine how those records are used, basically. Now, the hospital is just the custodian of those records. So they really have no right to restrict you from seeing your records, which belong to you in the first place. You are the one that actually now gets to determine how the records are processed, or if you even want them to delete it. So primary owner of health records is the patient and not the hospital. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much from the three panelists. I'm also having a concern to also add to that. It's a very critical issue for someone to move to the hospital to diagnose for an issue or do a test. And then when the time comes for him or her to get a result, it's being denied. So it's a very critical issue, which I think this community should really look into and see how we can provide solution as well. because it's a very critical issue. Someone is going to the hospital to find out what is the problem to her, so you know how to treat it, and then to deny those information. That's a critical issue. Thank you once again for your contribution. You allow three persons to ask their questions in that order, and after that we end this section. So first to call on Kenechiko to ask his question, and after that I will followed by Oluwa Karode. Hello, Kenechiko. Okay, I think you are not getting from Kenechiko, so can Oluwa Karode.
Good morning, Oluwakorede. Hi, good morning.
Yeah,
Can
sorry
you hear
about
me?
that pronunciation.
Okay, that's
Yes,
fine.
yes.
Okay, I want to confirm the data protection right, does it extend to data locality? Does it also cover where the data is actually stored? I know in Nigeria, we still use things like cloud services, and I know most cloud platforms are not domiciled in Nigeria. So the laws give stipulations and guidance as to the actual location where the data is stored. I want to confirm you understand the question, please.
Okay, so let me attempt responding. So you rightly said most of the services that we use, right, are not domiciled here. We have access to it because, of course, we have the internet. So we have locality matters, and as it is today, locality has transcended physical geographical location. It's gone way beyond, so that we look at locality now with respect to areas where services are covered for. So locality will be defined within that term. However, most of the laws we have are actually cascades of existing laws. For example, the Nigeria Data Protection Act, right? It extends or covers data locality. This is simply just focusing on where the data is physically stored, right? Or let's say digitally stored. So if it was generated within Nigeria, right, those guys are committed to providing a server that focuses on keeping that data for your locality. So when we discuss it under that term, your data coverage. So let me put it this way. We have a lot of domains. Back in the day, it used to be just .com, something.com. We now have most of it built for different countries. So we have .ng, .gh, ZA, and the rest of them. So most of the data generated within .ng are kept within services that provide for .ng. So in that aspect, locality covers that. I don't know if that there's also the case of cross-border transfers. I don't know if that's it would shed light on your question.
Yeah, it does. I just want to know that we're also considering that. I mean, I'm protecting the laws, giving all the rules and everything. I'm not super strong on cybersecurity, but me actually having access to the server where all of this is stored, does that not mean I can access, especially if there's no protection on data or rest? So I just want to be sure that
Yeah.
I've not really looked at the act. I want to know all these things are also being considered.
Yeah, they're considered, and that's part of why whoever is giving such service, that's why it's strict down. This is part of why we are big on enforcement, because enforcement empowers an agency to ensure that whoever claims to or says he has the capacity to deliver such should also have what it takes, because there are requirements to be able to provide such kind of services. So yes, from cybersecurity perspective, somebody who knows where the service is coming from, right, is able to breach it. And that's part of the reason why most servers actually not even want to look physical where access actually is gotten from, but they mirror it on different places, so that you are mirroring such service makes room for cross border. That's the case. Certain requirements for data in transit to remain the same with data at rest. For every financial institutions, particularly if you remember what happened recently as we Burkina Faso, Nigeria, and all of those stuff. Remember what's happening right now, even with ICE in the United States and all, where there's the issues of FBI being it in giving information to ICE agents and all of this stuff. So there's a lot of violation happening. And I foresee big storm coming as regards this particular ICE operations and all. Maybe not now, maybe in the next number of years when this particular administration is no more in government. I'm sure some other person will come up with it. So yes, it's a concern. It's captured for Nigeria, it's captured within ours. Not very detailed. Guys must also be involved to contribute to the review of that act or the law, as the case may be.
All right, thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much.
I'm sure, okay, that's okay by you. So can we hear from Kenechukwu if he's online right now? Okay, so let's go to Marianne. Marianne?
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, Mario, thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. And I want to say thank you for this wonderful session. It has been an eye-opener from the beginning to the end, getting to know the difference between the cybersecurity and privacy, data privacy. So I'm a cybersecurity awareness specialist. And one thing I just want to chip in is on the person that asked a question on her data not being given to her in the hospital. And to be sincere, when it comes to cybersecurity, we're talking about the CIA triad, which is the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And for there, that hospital has breached the availability of her data. Because when we talk about availability, when you come for your data, you need your data. You have every right. You have every right to be given your data. So I think, I don't know, I would just want to ask a question. Is there any law? We know the Nigeria, the NDPA, is it that, do we have the right to sue for breach of or any of this CIA triad when it comes to cybersecurity? Because I think this call for alarm. When we don't know what is happening to you, you cannot see it. We know, yes, it's confidential, but you as the data owner, you're supposed to know what is wrong with you before you can be able to say, okay, yeah, let's go ahead with the treat thing. So my question is to doctors, please, is there any law in place that we can be able to like sue any organization that like breach your confidentiality, your integrity, and your availability? Thank you so much.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, you do. As captured even within the law, within the act, sorry. Yes, you do. Right? So there's who's the person who can sue? The person who can sue is any individual whose personal data has been processed in violation, right, of that act. Now, what's the violation? Say maybe as a customer or as a user, I perhaps gave you my data and you used it without my consent. So most of the argument they have is that you consented at the beginning, and I think we've dealt with consent. Once consent is done with vague details, right, it's very likely not total consent. So if, for example, the grounds on which I can sue is, number one, if the person uses my data without my consent, right? Beyond, let's put it this way, there's a purpose for collecting the data. If you use it beyond my agreed purpose, or we agreed on a particular purpose and use it beyond that, I can sue you. If there's a case or a case where you fail to protect my data, right, against, let's say, unauthorized access, maybe leakages or compromise, this is part of why every organization is expected to, in at least within 72 hours, inform the regulator that this thing has happened. It's not you as a client or as the owner of the data approaching them and they tell you, oh, there was a breach. So if there's a breach and you raise it up with the regulator should have a record of that organization having told the regulator that, yeah, there was a breach, right? So if the person handling my data has not informed the regulator, right, for their specific, because there's regulators for finance, for health, all of these guys have their regulators as far as data protection is concerned. So if, for example, you transfer my data outside of where it was locally collected, right, without adequate safeguards, I can sue. So remember that there are different rights in it. One of it we mentioned is a right for erasure, which is the right to be deleted. So there's right to access my personal data. There's right to rectification of my data in case it has changed, for example. Then there's also right to erasure. I want to be forgotten. So once all of these are breached, I can sue. This is based on our NDPA, right? So that's how much I can contribute.
Thank you. I don't know if there's any other question again. I think
There are
Connecticut is
questions on the
unable
chat.
to.
There are some, I think there is a question I saw on the
Oh,
chat.
okay. Okay, so let me go through that. So from the chat, we have, sorry, where is it? I can't see it.
Okay, I can read it from here. It
Okay.
says, it's from, can you see it?
Okay, is it from Sam Sudin? Is it that one?
Sudin Saidu.
Okay. The question is, in simple terms, what is the difference between data banks and data stores? So, any of the three panelists can respond to this. Hello?
Okay, let me respond. So I think I think it's clear in his definition. When the question is asked, a bank and a store. The bank is just simply centralized. It's long term, right? And is used for large scale or for large coverage, right? Whereas the store is anywhere, not necessarily centralized and not necessarily long term. So the store is like the a smaller version of the bank. To picture it like a POS guy, or let's say an ATM machine, and then the bank itself. Picture it that way as far as data is concerned. So there's a volume of data I want to access, and it can only at some point only be available in a larger storage, as opposed to the store where it can have just limited. And sometimes the store can be for specifics required within that local environment. Okay, so if you are accessing, if data is accessed within a local environment, perhaps through a particular service or a server, you'd observe that what's most prevalent there would be what people access normally. So let me use an example that is very basic, but can help in communicating this. There are places you go to, you want to get certain stuff from certain stores, you may not be able to get it. Say, for example, if you want to buy tomatoes, the best place to get tomatoes is my city of Jos. So we have banks of tomatoes here. But if you want to get it in some place like Lagos, it's perhaps in stores, maybe not in banks, fresh tomatoes, that is, something like that. So grains are very more popular up north than they are down south or perhaps even the west. So you would observe that within the north, we would have like a bank of grains, but down south, they would have maybe stores for grain. So the volume that's available for the data you're requiring will be specific to where is most likely large scale, and that's for banks. And then where it's actually in smaller size and short terms will be in stores.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. We really appreciate each and every one of you for being part of this webinar. For those who asked their questions and also the panelists who have been able to respond to every question that is being posed by our attendees. We really appreciate you all. And I would like to hand over this moment now to Madam Priscilla, the treasurer, to continue with. Thank you, Priscilla.
Thank you once more. Thank you. I see some questions are coming in, or some contributions are coming in on the chat, and we really appreciate all the contributions coming in on the chat. We thank you. We have covered quite a lot of ground today, and our time is fast spent. Our speakers today have made it quite clear that data privacy in Nigeria project. So I want to say a massive thank you to our incredible panelists, starting with Dr. Paul, breaking down ethics and the reality that we face. Mrs. Chibugo Ilo, for reminding us that privacy should not be a privilege for the few, but a right for all. And that, these laws should be as clear and as simple for everybody to be able to, for the sharp insight into cybersecurity and some of the red flags that we need to watch out for. Special thank you to the Internet Society Nigeria chapter. Please, if you're not a member, you're invited to join us. It's internetsociety.org. Thank you for Internet Society Nigeria chapter for creating this platform. And most importantly, thank you, our audience, for your brilliant questions and for being part for a safer and more trusted Nigerian internet. The vice president was supposed to do like a roundup session, but he's airborne at he arrives safely wherever he's going to. So for a call to action, as we leave today, I want to challenge every one of us here to do one thing. Go to your most used app today, check your private and why am I sharing. So just go to any of your, check your privacy settings, check what you are sharing and why you are sharing. Once again, if you are not a member of Internet Society Nigeria chapter, please visit our website and join us. And secure. Please, we'll use 1 minute. Everybody should please put on their cameras. Let's take one picture, 1 or 2 pictures, and then we'll say our goodbyes. Can we all put on our cameras, please? Nkoro, you take the pictures, right?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Are we all set? Some persons are yet to on their cameras. Okay, I'm doing the first shot right now. So all cheese to everybody. All right, so just hold on. Let me take the second one. Okay, I'm taking the second one right now. Okay, and that's okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Back to you, Igba. Hello?
Okay, so thank you, everyone. Have a very good evening, good rest of the day. Stay safe, stay secure. It's been an absolute pleasure together with Nkoro. Goodbye for now. Have a very lovely rest of the day and please stay safe.
All
Thank
right.
you very
Thank you
much.
so much,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you
Bye.
for having me.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, sir.
No.
All right. Bye.